welcome to yet another wonderful edition of Stories of the Dark. I am your host, Glen Clark, and this is part 2 of my EVP show. Part 1 has already been posted, so I hope you've had an opportunity to take a look at that. And as always, you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And soon I'm going to be having a Skype account set up for when I go, do live programs. Kind of on a note to start the program, today has been just one of them odd days. I don't know if it's the full moon or what's going on, or full moon's already passed. I really don't know, but it just seems like people out as I was out and about this evening working my way home from my job, that they were just strange. I mean, just their mindset just is not the way it should be. So kind of a question to all my listeners, that if you encountered anybody that may have been a little odd in the last couple of days, send me an email or comment on my video and let me know, just so I know that I'm not the only one that had one of them odd days. Can email me at storiesofthedark1@gmail.com. That's storiesofthedark@gmail.com. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to play for you a video that I had from last night, that the internet connection kept dying on me. That's the purpose for this part 2 program. So I'm going to play it for you. It's as soon as I cue it up. Actually, if you go to part 1 of of this program, it will tell you who it's from. It'll be mentioned in the description. So I'm gonna go ahead and play this, and I'll come back and we'll play a little music, and then play a couple of more different things. And then I've got a website I want to read to you. It's it more or less looks like a skeptic's view on EVPs, so it looks quite interesting. So anyway, here's the video, and I will be back as soon as this is done playing.
Some people say there's no such thing as ghosts.
Maximum volume.
Convincing evidence that spirits do walk among us are through electronic voice phenomena recordings, otherwise known as EVPs. If you've never heard a ghost communicate before, you're about to. These are 6 terrifying ghost EVP recordings. Number 6, We're Not Dead. In January 2010, the American Paranormal Research Association was conducting a paranormal investigation inside the Linda Vista Community Hospital in Los Angeles, California. The hospital originally opened in 1904 and was prosperous, providing patients with things like butter, eggs, vegetables, poultry, and fresh milk, something no hospital did at the time. In 1924, a fire burned it down, but it was rebuilt and functioned well for decades. But by the 70s, this place began its decline, and soon the neighborhood around it also became less affluent, which affected its funding. This directly led to the decline in the quality of care workers there, as well as doctors. It was officially closed in 1991, and stories about the mistreatment and abuse of patients became rampant. After it was closed, the hospital became a center for paranormal investigations and was also used in various Hollywood films. Guards there reported seeing shadows and hearing weird humming sounds, and even cries in the night. Those who visit have also said they've been pushed and touched by unseen hands. In particular, there are 3 reported spirits that haunt the hospital. This includes an orderly making the rounds, a little girl seen crying, and a young woman pacing the hallways. When the paranormal researchers conducted their investigations, they were exploring the basement area when they recorded an unusual EVP. They inquired how the spirits were actually connected with the hospital, and surprisingly, they actually got a response. Here is the audio in which you can hear the voice say, "We're not dead."
How are you associated with the hospital? How are you associated with the hospital?
Number 5. I'm not done here. In 2011, paranormal investigators explored the Cafe Sports House in the greater Manchester area. It wasn't always a pub, but was first opened as the Roxy Cinema in July of 1929. The auditorium had a distinctive circular seating area that featured raised seats, and it was capable of accommodating more than 900 people. The Roxy closed down in 1965 and was boarded up for several years before skateboarding became popular, and it was transformed into a skate park. Eventually, it was changed into a squash club, and then into the Cafe Sports Pub that it is today. It has 3 floors, a massive cellar that is now a gym, a bar, and a huge bingo area that has remained fairly the same as before. For a long time, those who have explored and occupied the place have reported hearing noises coming up from inside the cellar. Shadows have also been seen in another hot spot around the corridors near the bathrooms, and a mysterious man has been spotted close to the end area of the bar. Investigators have reported unusual phenomena while inside, including seeing moving objects like punching bags swinging on their own, and even tables levitating into the air. Perhaps the most controversial and terrifying experiences was when investigators captured an EVP in 2011. It was recorded while investigators explored the pub, and in it you can hear a whispering voice telling the researchers that they are still in fact a presence in the establishment. The people standing next to the recorder at the time did not hear anything at all, and it wasn't until it was examined after that the whisper was finally heard. Here it is so you can judge for yourself.
Yes, so.
Number 4. Would you help us? Sitting on more than 1,000 acres of farmland, the Athens Lunatic Asylum, otherwise dubbed as the Ridges, has always been considered controversial and haunted. In Ohio, on January 9, 1874, the asylum first opened its doors, and throughout the years has welcomed thousands of patients. The main building alone had 544 rooms, and as time went by, many more areas were added as the building was expanded. Some of the later additions included a tuberculosis ward, gymnasium, and even a dairy barn. The building was designed so that the less severe patients were placed near the central area where they could receive interaction and socialize. Meanwhile, those who were more severe were relegated to the outer fringes of the building, far away from the exits and entrances. However, as more people started coming in, family members were dropping off, not only relatives with illnesses, but also their elderly. As overcrowding became an issue, so did the quality control, and the care soon declined. Doctors and caregivers began to resort to primitive techniques, including shock therapy, water therapy, and transorbital lobotomies. These were some of the most dangerous treatments conducted, and they resulted in many deaths. Moreover, the living conditions were also horrifying, with some patients left restrained for months or even years at a time. With such a long and troubled history, it's no surprise the Ridges is dubbed as one of the most haunted places in the United States. Those who have explored the area report seeing a ghost dubbed as Mary walking the halls late at night. Reports also come in of people standing behind them when they're looking in a mirror. The most famous story, however, is that of a female patient named Margaret, who went missing and was later found dead in an abandoned ward. She was found in the nude and determined to have died of heart failure. However, it took nearly a month before her body was ever even found. It was badly decomposed at that point, and it had melted into the floor, leaving a stain that some say is still present today. More than just a paranormal experience, investigators also managed to capture several EVPs. In this first one, you can hear a man scream, and this was recorded in a former padded room at the asylum.
Yeah, some of it. They used to have pads and stuff in there. Yeah, some of it. They used to have pads and stuff in there.
This next one is a woman saying, "Will you help us?" And you can clearly hear it. We'll play it at regular speed and then enhance so you can hear it even better. Number 3, Get Out. Perhaps Dublin's most haunted landmark, the Hellfire Club sits atop Montpelier Hill. The abandoned building has had a long, storied history, and today is a very popular tourist attraction. William Conley initially built it as a personal hunting lodge in 1725. It's said he used the stones from an ancient burial site to build part of it. After he passed away, the structure was rented out and became known as the Hellfire Club, which was a gathering place for men to partake in lewd and immoral acts. Rumors began to spread that the club was a frequent site of animal sacrifices because the group was involved in satanic rituals. They were also accused of kidnapping a farmer's daughter and even cannibalizing her. But it didn't stop there. People began to tell stories about how the group drank non-stop and even made a pact with the devil himself, and it's because of this that stories of the paranormal are so high at this location. Today, the stories about Hellfire Club and the countless hauntings that have beset the structure since it was abandoned still persist. Paranormal investigators who visit here talk of many strange occurrences, one of the most unsettling of which is the fact that actual EVP recordings have been captured by investigators while exploring the interior. The most famous was captured by the Kilkenny Investigative Paranormal Society. The group captured a voice on a recording telling the investigators to get out. It's been enhanced so you can hear it well, and it will send chills down your spine. Number 2, I'm Not Crazy. The Village Salon is part of a set of historic buildings that stand in the heart of Grand Cane, Louisiana. Back in the 1800s, the set of buildings once served as a barber shop and even functioned as a courthouse that managed small fines. Employees of the salon have reported several instances where they've witnessed poltergeist activity on the premises. They would constantly see moving items, electronic devices turning on and off, clothes hampers being flipped, and more. Amy, who's the owner of the salon, says she doesn't feel threatened by the spirit or hauntings, and even nicknamed the presence, calling her Brenda. A set of paranormal investigators conducted research there and said they did feel as if they were not alone. For the first few minutes after starting, they audibly heard the sound of what seemed to be a marble falling and rolling on the floor, but when they looked, they couldn't find anything or see any object. Moreover, they captured what seems to be a very clear EVP of a female saying, "I'm not crazy." EVPs, or electronic voice phenomena, are often classified in different ways depending on how audible they are. This particular one is in Class A because it's so crisp and one of the clearest EVP recordings you'll hear.
Found it over. I'm not crazy. But different people have different stages of found it over. I'm not crazy. But different people have different stages of
Number 1. Get out. Help us. One of the most famous haunted ships ever known is that of the Queen Mary. It was first built in the 1930s and is larger in size when compared to the Titanic. Throughout its history, it served as a transport luxury liner and even a World War II ship before it was eventually retired. Over the years, the Queen Mary has seen countless deaths. Some of the more famous ones include that of John Henry, who was a young man that died when he was trampled to death after trying to flee a fire. It's said that various bright lights and knocking can be heard in the engine room, and that this is believed to be John. Meanwhile, in the pool area, several guests and investigators have seen the apparitions of a little girl who unfortunately died while sliding through the banister when a wave upset her course and she ended up breaking her neck. Her ghost is said to haunt the area, and she wanders around looking for her doll and mummy. In addition, 2 other women died in the same area, and guests also regularly see them. One of the most brutal deaths, though, was that of a cook who was murdered because the troops didn't like the meals he prepared. He was stuffed inside the oven and burned alive, and his desperate screams can still be heard to this day in the ship's kitchen. Today, the Queen Mary is permanently decommissioned and has been transformed into a hotel and museum, with ghost tours available for those willing to brave the haunted vessel. And indeed, ghost hunters and paranormal investigators report that a multitude of apparitions and sightings have been seen throughout. In one instance, they caught an EVP when the American Paranormal Research Association searched through the first-class pool area and captured the voice of a girl saying, "Get out and help us." As mentioned, the pool area is notoriously haunted, and guests have repeatedly seen, felt, and heard apparitions in the area. What's interesting about this one is that the investigators actually hear the voice in real time, which sounds like a young girl.
Come closer. Come closer.
So there were 6 terrifying ghost EVP recordings. Hauntings and apparitions are often a personal experience, just stories you hear about without actually seeing any evidence. But capturing EVPs are unique as they can be shared with anyone willing to listen and serve as strong proof that in the end, there is life after death. If you like this video, then remember to hit the notification bell because every Saturday night we post new videos that we know you'll enjoy. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.
In 2009, Apper traveled to one of the most recognized haunted locations on the West Coast, the
And welcome back to Stories of the Dark. I am your host, Glen Clark, and you were listening to, the EVP video that I was trying to play last night on my last podcast, but the internet decided it wanted to have other ideas. So yeah, that with EVP, they can be discounted. They can. A lot of people are look to discount those as different things like a passing radio station or whatever. Like I said in my last podcast, but the truth of the matter is nobody knows what they actually are. I've recorded several of my own, so I mean I know what I recorded at the time was not there when I recorded it. And in fact, my producer and I are thinking of doing a EVP experiment of our own, where we take a cell phone and just like place it in a room for like a few hours just to see what we might get. And if we do get anything, of course, it will be shared here on the program without a doubt. So right now what I'm going to do is play the second video I was going to play for you last night. And it's a video that was, or actually it's a video that was taken aboard the Queen Mary. It may be the same as you heard in the last one. I'm not sure. There may be a few differences. But anyway, American Paranormal Society has this posted on YouTube. So go take a look at their page and subscribe to it if you'd like. I'm sure they like the subscribers. Also, the last video I played was from a group called Scary Mysteries. So same thing, take a look at their work and subscribe if you'd like. And also subscribe to me, don't forget that. So hit the subscribe button. Give me a like on my videos and on my podcast. It really helps out. And you can also follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And as I said earlier, soon I'll have Skype set up, and we'll try to do a live program where we can have you, the listener, call in and share your stories or you know, whatever we want to do that particular night. So anyway, here's the next video, and after that I'll take another quick break and then come back and read you something I got off the internet. This is Stories of the Dark, and I am your host, Glen Clark.
In 2009, Apper traveled to one of the most recognized haunted locations on the West Coast, the RMS Queen Mary, located in Long Beach, California. The EVP you are about to hear was collected in the first-class pool area, where the spirit of a young girl named Jackie is reported to manifest. It is clear that the voice was audible, as you will hear Apper founder Brandon Alvis and investigator Joey West react to the voice.
Come closer. No way. Get out some of that. Yeah. Get out. Go. Get out. Come closer. No way. Get out some of that. Yeah. Get out. Go. Get out.
www.apraparanormal.com.
And we're back live here, and just kind of curious about what you might think about those EVPs that were taken from the Queen Mary, especially since they are of a child. I think I talked about it in my last podcast, that I do think it's awfully strange that a lot of the EVPs that you hear are sometimes from children, and especially aboard the Queen Mary. I mean, there must have been something that has kept her there on that ship. I mean, the reports is that she's looking for her mother or for a doll, but the question that I'm wondering is, does she even know she's really gone? Because there are some that will actually will go and not actually realize they're gone. They think that everything is normal, just like you or I. It's to them they're still here, and that's where the whole you wonder how they can be convinced to kind of cross over and have their life of eternity. I mean, I know if it was me, I would not want to be stuck here day after day, or actually for them there is no time. There's time doesn't exist for them. So anyway, I'm gonna play a little. We're gonna take a little break and then come back, and I'll read you some stuff that I got off the internet today. So come back in just a few minutes. I'm Glen Clark, and this is Stories of the Dark. And welcome back to Stories of the Dark. I am Glen Clark, and we are talking about EVPs, and I've shared a couple of videos with you. I hope you enjoyed those, and if you did, give the people that posted those, give them a like, and subscribe to their channels as well. The last thing I want to read for you before we end the program for this edition, it came from BBC.com. It's entitled, I gotta bring the laptop up so I can read what it says, The People Who Think They Tune Into Dead Voices. It's by like I said, it's from BBC.com. Advocates of electronic voice projection, EVP, claim that they can use radio equipment to communicate with the dead. But are they just hearing what they want to hear? In 1969, a mysterious middle-aged Latvian doctor turned up in Gerrard's Cross with a large collection of tape recordings. He had, he said, been conducting experiments in communication with the dead and had established contact with Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini, and many other deceased 20th century statesmen. The recordings, 72,000 of them, contained their voices. His name was Konstantin Raudiv, and he called his technique electronic voice projection, or EVP. It wasn't real-time interactive communication. You ask your questions and left the tape running, recording silence. There's ways that you can do that. You can either do it in silence, or you can ask questions, however you prefer. And my website just locked up on me, so that's really good. So if I can get it to scroll down, I'll be able to read the rest of this to you. I just love the internet, don't you? So anyway, continuing. But listening back through the mush and static, you could sometimes just about make out people speaking. Gerrard's Cross was the home of a publisher, Colin Smythe, whom Raudiv hoped would publish a book on his findings. And scrolling down, it looks like it may have worked here. Okay, Smythe was keen. Again, like I said, the internet here is not very good. I'm working off of Wi-Fi, and it's very, very spotty. Works sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. So, you just kind of, it's one or half a dozen the other, But anyway, continuing, Smythe was keen, but he needed to persuade the chairman of the publishing company, Sir Robert Meyer, that this wasn't all a hoax. So Raudiv laid on a series of electronic seances in Gerrard's Cross, one of which Sir Robert attended. As luck had it, the late pianist Artur Schnabel was on the line and spoke, at least to the satisfaction of Lady Meyer, who was also present and had known Schnabel. The book called Breakthrough went ahead, and EVP was on the scene. More technologically up to date than spirit slate writing, and less messy than ectoplasm. It dragged the world of spiritualism into the late 20th century. Nowadays, EVP is a standard tool of ghost hunters worldwide. There are hundreds of internet EVP forums, and many serious, well-educated people who see it as a proof positive that the dead are trying to talk to us. For example, Annabella Cardozo, a former Portuguese career diplomat who lives in Spain and publishes the instrumental Transcommunication Journal, She has a well-equipped recording studio and claims to have replicated the Gerard's Cross findings. My voices are not little voices, she says. They are loud and clear and totally understandable. She offered to send me a CD. They're talking about the writer of this, not me. I wish I could hear that, though. Meanwhile, Smythe is still living in Gerard's Cross. Rodiv had wanted us to believe that Hitler spoke to him in Latvian, not a language that he ever mastered while alive. He said things like, kindle willingly, and you are a girl here, or else you are thrown out. I put it to Smythe that these were surely not the kind of utterances we associated with the Fuhrer, but he points out it could be identity theft. A communicator is not necessarily going to be truthful. They could be using the names of famous people in the hopes that they will be taken notice of. A lot of times, as I said in the last EVP, or in the last episode rather, not EVP, whatever, that sometimes these voices will come in and they will say that they're one person, or you may think they're one person, but they could very well be somebody with some pretty bad intentions. So continuing, so what happened to the Rodiv tapes? In a storeroom in Smythe's house, almost impossible to get into for boxes, we finally found 7/4-inch reel-to-reel tapes, probably unplayed for 4 decades, and on one was Rodiv summoning up the dead. According to a book published at the time by Smythe's partner, a Russian voice at that session said, "Stefan is here. But if you are Stefan, you do not believe me. It is not very difficult. We will teach Petrus," but on the tape there was nothing, just hiss. On another occasion, the broadcaster Giles Brandreth was present when Rodiv produced the voice of the late Winston Churchill, speaking what everyone present agreed were the words from Land of Hope and Glory. It was credibly Winston Churchill, Brandreth remembers. Funny, I wouldn't mind listening to that just to see what that was like. And then continuing, but when we listened together to the tape, we had to agree that it sounded nothing like Churchill. It was far lighter than the familiar gravely voice. Maybe it's the young Winston, Brandreth suggested, or a Churchill impersonator. But who impersonates the young Churchill? We couldn't think of anyone. See, a lot of times, like I said, these EVPs will do that. It'll be one voice and it'll be a totally different person. And continuing, when Cardozo's CD arrived, I was disappointed that the voices in Spanish and Portuguese are not very clear. According to her translations, they said things like, "There is a rabbit on your head," but Dr. Cardozo was like other EVP investigators, definitely recording voices. So what's going on? The simplest explanation is that EVP voices are just stray radio transmissions. Usually they are so faint and masked by static interference that it's hard to make out what they are saying, and the EVP investigator has to interpret them for you. They might seem like a weakness that's also their power. As Joe Banks, a sound artist, points out, a dead person speaking in studio quality wouldn't be nearly so convincing as a voice you must strain to hear. Banks has an ongoing project called Roarsanich Audio, or something like that. If you know of this, clarify that for me. He suggests that the voices are the oral equivalent of ink blot test devised by Swiss psychologist Hermann Rorschach, or whatever. He agrees that while the EVP experimenters think they are doing parapsychology, they're actually unwittingly carrying out psychology experiments. For example, if you take recorded speech and replace every sixth of a second with white noise, the speech is still comprehensible. But if instead of white noise use silence, it is much harder to understand. We are naturally well adapted by evolution to imaginatively reconstruct speech against a noisy background. Imagine trying to whisper in a windy forest to your hunting companions. EVP enthusiasts, Bank thinks, aren't idiots. They are just being fooled by audio illusions that take us all in. But once you start experimenting with EVP, it's hard to stop. After Breakthrough was published, Rada progressed from voices captured on tape to voices coming from animals, in particular a budgerigger named Putsy, who spoke in the voice of a dead 14-year-old girl. Similar work today being done by EVP researcher Brian Jones in Seattle. He records the noises made by seagulls, dogs, cats, and even squeaky doors and crunching pebbles. They all contain voices. One dog says, "Where's Sheila?" referring to its owner. Other complains of its owners. They always sail away. Jones thinks he can capture thoughts that somehow are in the air. I have documented a lot of things that are pretty stunning that way, he says. He would like to use his techniques to help solve crime or to pick up the thoughts of stroke victims who have lost the power of speech. So far, he has been shunned by private detectives and doctors. But the EVP community really want to believe that they are onto something. And many of us find the idea of communicating with the dead so tantalizing, so appealing, and yet so elusive that it's easy to see how normal psychological mechanisms can be co-opted into making us believe in the unbelievable. And that ends that story. Again, that's a skeptic's view of it, not necessarily my view or anybody else's. With this kind of work, it's kind of anybody's guess, and you're free to think of it how you want. That's how I look at it, and always go for the obvious and move forward. That's how I like to look at it. So we're going to go ahead and end the program now. I hope you've enjoyed this edition of Stories of the Dark. I'll be back another time. We'll do another program here in the next couple of days or so. And until then, be sure you follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Give me a like on Facebook and subscribe to my page. I certainly would appreciate it. This is Stories of the Dark, and I am Glen Clark, and we'll see you in our next edition.